in the actual implementation, they had pictures of the device that the user was getting help on. It gave the users nice, warm, and fuzzy that they were actually seeing help about the device that they needed help on. So we just had a single image from the cover, and what we had to do in JavaScript for the cover is we wanted to create a placeholder image tag, and we wanted to give it an ID. And so the placeholder image tag is just an image. It has the ID, and it doesn't have a source attribute. And so this is normally with an image where you would indicate where the image is. Then, and here's the trick, following this image, what we want to do is add a script and say, let's locate this image. So we say, we create a variable, and we say, within this document, find the element that has the ID cover BG, so that's this image. And then, once we've got that, then what we want to do in the JavaScript is change the source property on that element. So we're reassigning the source property, and we're saying top, so here's our familiar string, top loc strings cover BG. So from here now, this says we're going to get the cover background that we coded up in our, sorry, I'm clicking around here. We're going to pull in the cover, the background that we did when we assigned our locs. And so we can say here, we said loc strings cover BG is .images devs dev image. So we've used the JSON devs variable. We looked up the current device that we're showing, and then we said find whatever's associated with the image element. So here's our image. So we're pulling in the image cake.jpg. So whenever you see the help displayed, the cover page displayed every time I do this, every time I refresh, we're actually pulling in a new cover image. And so we can show this by adding this to our query string. We can say dev equals, and if I want to say pies instead, carriage turn, now we're actually looking at all the information. So something else changed here too, right? We also changed the actual title here because we're pulling in different information from the JSON file, but we're also now dynamically pulling in the image, the link to the image pie.jpg instead of cake.jpg. So let's just take a look at this for a minute. As it turns out, we had the cover in an XSL file, and we were doing some other processing on it. This actually could be just coded as a static HTML file, and we could still use the script. So here we see it in place. Here we have, as before, this pulls in our product name, and this pulls in the string user guide, which is for the specific language, and that's why this is one of the other reasons we had to do this was we needed to pull in on the cover different strings for different languages. But here's where we pull in the image. So let's see. First off, here's our placeholder. So we say here's our image, and our ID is cover BG. We have no no source attribute. And then down here, we actually run the script, and we say, okay, find that BG image, which is right here, and then invoke or assign, find that image and assign it to BG image, and then assign the source property, the new top loc strings cover BG, and so now this actually inserts that image in place. So the third thing we had to do was we had to hide blocks, hide and show blocks. And what this called for us was we had a variety of tables. The tables, essentially they had a page, and a specific table had to appear for each specific device. And so what we did was in our output, the JavaScript, or in the HTML, if you will, what we did was in the file, when it starts out, all the blocks or all the tables are hidden. And we'll show this in just a minute. And then here's our onload. As I said, we wanted to just use onload sparingly, but this is a case where we did need to use it. And what we did was we said, so we want to add to the body of this HTML onload show dev label. And so in this case, what we want to do is pass through a label that identifies whose information are we showing. And so, or which table for which device. In this case, the show dev is a JavaScript function, and what that does is it looks for elements that have a particular attribute, and then if that attribute matches and the attribute actually matches the label we pass in here, then make it visible. So this is fairly standard JavaScript stuff for hiding and showing. So in this case, what we do is we find the object we're interested in, and we change its style display properties to a particular style. Now, when I coded this first, I was fairly safe about this. And you may know when you're doing hiding and showing in JavaScript, if you're hiding and showing a block, then you need to say display equals block or display equals none. That hides and shows it. But a table row can be hidden with, you hide it with none, of course, but then to show it, now I'm just combing my memory for this. I always look these things up. Display equals table row, you'd have to say. So in JavaScript formally, you need to identify specific different things to display. Now, as it turns out, there's a little shortcut you can use in JavaScript. And if you want to get things to display, just normally, instead of specifying any display attribute, or instead of specifying a display attribute that's specific to the type of thing you're displaying, you can actually pass it the null string. And this then actually turns on the display. So most browsers support this. So to turn something off, you would say style displays equals none. And to turn it back on, you'd say style display equals the null string. So let's take a look at this actually in practice. And you have to forgive me a minute while I get this online. So we structured this fairly formally. So as you see, what we have here is I'd had a separate series of show device calls based on the type of object. So for a span, you have to use inline. For P, you have to use block for the display property. For div, you also use a block. For list item, you actually have to say list item. And so this is just a very I was trying to generalize things and just make sure that we could handle this in all cases if we needed to handle it. In this case, really, in the actual case, what we ended up doing is just using this one. So for a table, the display property is table. And so what we do here in this function is we then loop through all, in this case, the tag name is table, so we loop through all the tables. And if the table title is the same as the string that we're looking for,